It's all about truth. All of it. Every single thing. All boils down to the truth. We all want truth. The truth will set you free. All right, welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. This is Press for Truth Live. I'm your host, Dan Dix. Today is Tuesday, April the 5th, 2016, and today we're going to be talking all things Panama Papers, folks. This is obviously the biggest story to hit independent media. It's been all across the alternative websites for the past few days, and now, of course, the mainstream media is going to start picking up on this. We've already seen your CNNs and Foxes and CBCs starting to chime in on what they're finding here. But the question is, what are they talking about? What are they trying to expose? What are they saying they've discovered? That's what we're going to be delving into today, folks. The key question about these papers is qui bono. Who is it that benefits from this so-called leak? And joining us on the line later in the program is going to be Jeff Berwick of the Dollar Vigilante to help us break all of this down. And, you know, this is dealing with the biggest data dump in the history of journalism. We're talking about over 11 million documents that had to be combed through by a consortium of journalists over the past 8 months or so. These documents date back to the late 70s, coming from this Panamanian law firm. And, you know, we have to ask the question, after this information was revealed, who put it out and who's backing the people who put it out? Well, let's have a look at, according to here on the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, we see that the information was indeed released. Here we see the Panama Papers. Who is in the Panama Papers? We have a list of some heavy hitters that they are pointing to here. You notice Vladimir Putin is on the list, even though Vladimir Putin's name did not even come up, not once in any of these documents. In fact, he was only implicated because of people he knew. I believe there was a $2 million investment or loan made to an arena where his daughter is a figure skater. There's another friend of his who is a famous musician, and it is alleged that he holds $2 billion in an offshore account, you know, to keeping it outside of Russia. And I mean, even if that is true, well, good on him for keeping his money outside of the greedy hands of the Rothschild elite bankers. So we take a look at who this is. Let's just scroll to the bottom here and see, who are they in league with? Who are the supporters of their work, the people who released this paper? What do we see here? We see the Open Society Foundations. Okay, well, who are they? We go to the Open Society Foundation website, and its founder is none other than George Soros. He is the chairman, and this man right here, folks, is pure evil. Pure evil. Everything he says, he's actually doing the exact opposite. When they say Open Society Foundation, they mean, yeah, open society as in one world government, one world religion, one world cash system. Open it all up, but close it in for the elites at the top of the pyramid who are controlling this thing. So, I mean, this just screams inside job when you see guys like Soros backing and funding this thing. Who else do we have on the list here for supporters? Well, we have USAID. And of course, USAID, as we see here from globalresearch.ca, is a CIA front group. USAID has a history of working with the CIA as a front operation to help them spread that special kind of democracy. Who else do we have involved? We have the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Endowment, the Rockefeller Family Fund, Kellogg Foundation, and again, Open Society Foundation, Soros. So these are some of the major players here who are behind this so-called leak. And again, what are we seeing? What's coming out of this? Well, who is the mainstream media beginning to target? We're seeing they're targeting political enemies of the Western elite banking families. That is who is under attack. Look at Putin. Look at Bashar al-Assad. Look at the Prime Minister of Iceland, who is now severely under attack for these offshore holdings and was essentially forced to resign today. This is an all-out attack on anybody who's an enemy of the West and wants to operate outside of the Rothschilds' central controlled banking system. So that's what this really all boils down to, folks. So I want to cut to a video that we produced and just put out last night called the Panama Papers Key Bono, because we raised some points in this video that I think is important for our topic today. So if you haven't seen it, we're going to air that for you right now. And when we come back from the video, we'll be joined on the line by our guest, Jeff Berwick, the dollar vigilante, to help us break all of this down. But here is our clip called the Panama Papers Key Bono. In what is turning out to be one of the largest hacks in history, with more information coming out than WikiLeaks, Cablegate, offshore leaks, LuxLeaks, and SwissLeaks combined, the Panama Papers raises more questions than it answers. It started when Mossack Fonseca, a Panama-based law firm, was hacked by an anonymous source who sent the information to the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung, one of the largest in the German nation, and the first to get approval by the United States immediately after World War II, when freedom of speech in Germany was curtailed. The law firm focuses on offshore companies and shell companies. It's a way for the rich, powerful, fraudsters, celebrities, professional athletes, and drug smugglers to hide money from greedy governments and flaunt international rules. But don't let this fool you. Major banks, legal firms, and asset management companies are involved, protecting the wealth of these people. Russian President Vladimir Putin has reportedly $2 billion in his offshore account. And this is what's interesting and why this leak raises more questions than it answers. The three world leaders who have been exposed are enemies of the Western order. As mentioned, Vladimir Putin has been exposed, but so has Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and Iceland Prime Minister Sigmundur Gunnlaugsson. Of course, it goes without saying why Putin and Assad are targets of Western elites, but why the Prime Minister of Iceland? Well, Iceland has been the only country that has treated the bankers the way they should, by imprisoning them. After the 2008 meltdown, Iceland started laying charges, and by January of this year, 29 bankers have been jailed. And these are not low-level guys, but senior executive bankers. In contrast, in the US or the UK or even here in Canada, no one has been convicted. In fact, governments, through the taxpayers, gave these guys a bailout, essentially rewarding them for their destructive behavior. Even after the LIBOR scandal, these bankers walked away with a mere slap on the wrist. The target of these hacks are clearly enemies of the West. Luke Radowski of We Are Change points out in his video that previously the FBI turned the hacker Sabu into a snitch, so people working for him were actually working for the FBI without them knowing it. Is it possible that this recent hack was a product of a Western intelligence agency? Well, ask yourself this question: who benefits? And what about Canada? The state broadcaster CBC is reporting that at least 450 Canadians have been exposed in the hack. One of them is the president of the West Edmonton Mall, David Gurmezian, a prominent member of one of Canada's elite families. Another is a fraudster who scammed millions out of his victims and disappeared in 2007. His name comes up 1,449 times in the leaked documents. If there was purposeful intent behind this hack, what was the purpose of exposing some of Canada's elite families, if any? Perhaps this massive data dump was made out to look like a real hack on purpose, but now the media will do its job and focus on the three major candidates: Putin, Assad, and the Prime Minister of Iceland. This could be a classic problem-reaction-solution scenario. Create the problem by exposing all these offshore accounts, let the people react by demanding something be done about it, and then provide the solution, which is to further demonize the West's enemies and to make it harder for the small-time guys like you and me to hide our money from governments. Because, let's be honest, hiding your money in an offshore account from predatory states is not an act of aggression. It's true a lot of these guys are crony capitalists and deserve jail time. But many people are honest, hard-working individuals just trying to protect their capital from a government that squanders wealth for pointless wars, Soviet-era hospitals, and indoctrination centers for our children. So while this hack is big news, let's not throw away any critical analysis. Whether or not it was an act of an intelligence agency, now that the information is out there, how will the corporate state media spin this? And what will be their solution versus the real solution? Their solution being more control, more crackdowns on offshore investing and banking, that is, banking outside of Rothschild control. With the real solution being, of course, to end this fiat money empire and this house of cards that's being built on debt and interest that's paid on money created out of thin air. And that's really what this whole thing boils down to, ladies and gentlemen, is fiat-based currencies, money created out of thin air, and people trying to protect their assets from the government. And joining us here on the line is the one and only Jeff Berwick, our good friend at thedollarvigilante.com. Jeff, thanks so much, man, for joining us here today on PFT Live.
Always a pleasure, Dan.
So I want to get into this. I mean, this is obviously huge breaking news. A lot of confusion as to who's behind this or what it's all about. But let me just ask you, man, flat out: the Panama Papers, is this an inside job or what?
Well, I think you, people like yourself and Luke Rudowski and James Corbett have already looked into it, and I think it's already fairly convincing that it's quite clear. You said Key Bono, who benefits from this. It was all enemies of the Western elites and the actual groups backing this group that put out the information is backed by George Soros and all the other heinous criminals out there and the CIA. So it's I think that's fairly cut and dry at this point that it was put out by them. I don't know who else would want to put this out and to do it in such a way that it took a year with all these people around the world and no one leaked anything until now. Just reeks of involvement by the Western elites. But the really interesting thing is I think there's a few reasons why they're putting it out. And I guess we should just start with that a lot of the people are in uproar saying, oh, these people are evading taxes. If these people are evading taxes, they are actually heroes. We should be thanking them so much for keeping their money outside of the control of these governments all around the world. Money laundering is not a criminal act. Taxation itself is extortion. It is theft. So anyone who tries to avoid being extorted is, in that respect, a hero. I'm not saying Putin or Bashar al-Assad, however you say his name, the Syrian prime murderer, president, whatever he is. I'm not saying they're great guys, but I'm saying if their main goal was to avoid taxation, that is an act of heroism, and I support it. But of course, there's much more to it all than that.
Well, yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, it's not like these are angels here. We're not supporting, like, these aren't great guys, but I mean, they are doing things to protect themselves. And I mean, look at it like imagine it like this, folks. If you were a business, you're a company, let's say you made $1 million in profits this year, and you want to, you're going to be taxed, on that $1 million. So you figure out that, hey, if I take $500,000 of that, 500,000, and I invest it into another business that has something to do with my business, then now I'm only profiting 500,000, and I can only be taxed on 500,000 because that other 500,000 was an investment into the business. And then a few years later, you get all your money back minus a small percentage fee that this firm in Panama is going to make. Good on you. I mean, good for you. You managed to hide your funds from a government that was just going to take your tax money and put it into more wars and more, state indoctrination programs. So really, what's the big problem here? I mean, what else could it be about other than avoiding taxes?
Well, I think this is all quite clear what it is to me. It's all part of the greater plan to go into a one world government, one world monetary system. And they've been working towards that for decades now. So this totally plays into that. So what they're trying to do is make it seem like anyone who has any sort of offshore bank account, they're a criminal or a terrorist. Of course, the true criminals and terrorists are people like George Soros and most of the people at the top of the U.S. government and the people who control them. But that's the game they play. They try to make everyone else look like they're the criminals and terrorists, even though they are the actual criminals and terrorists. So this is I think it's two-part plan, essentially, by these criminals like George Soros, which is to take out a bunch of their enemies, people they don't like, people who haven't played ball with them, and that would include the prime minister of Iceland. He has actually been the most aggressive against going after the bankers after the 2008 collapse, much more than any other country. And you pointed out earlier, he's actually jailed bankers. So that really irritated them. And as I was actually I was wondering when they were going to get at Iceland, because I knew there was going to be a retaliation for that. This is actually a geopolitical financial war. Warfare isn't the same as it used to be. It used to be a lot of tanks and guys on horses even before that, and guys with muskets. This is more where it's going now. It's actually financial warfare and geopolitical and propaganda style warfare, InfoWars even, you could say, like Alex Jones says. So I was wondering when they were going to go after Iceland. I had my eyes on it. I was expecting something to happen there, and it looks like this is what they chose. They chose to go after him. They'll probably now put in a puppet leader to put in for Soros and all the other elites. And they probably decided that at Bilderberg last year when we were there, Dan, in Austria. So this is what's going on. So I think a big part of it is to get rid of a bunch of their enemies and consolidate even more power, which is what they always want to do, and then to get even more, get rid of people being able to hide their money anywhere in the world, which has been going on now for decades. The U.S. had FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, which is essentially meant that every bank in the world had to report to the U.S. government and the IRS if they had U.S. clients. That has made it almost impossible for U.S. people to actually get their money outside of the U.S. So this is just another step in that agenda of making it harder and harder to have any chance to get outside of this heinous extortion system called taxation. And this is an ongoing, and I don't know if you saw, Dan, but it was just today, I believe, the U.S. Treasury came out and said they're really going to crack down now on inversions. And an inversion is what you just pointed out. It's a way of sort of getting some of your money outside of the taxation system by investing in something outside of the country. They're really going to crack down on that now. They just announced that today, and I think the Panama Papers came out yesterday or the day before. So this is all planned, orchestrated. People need to wake up. If anyone out there is happy that a bunch of these guys got busted because they were trying to avoid taxes, you are a criminal. You are highly immoral. You are supporting a system of slavery, and I hope you die.
Well, you know what? It's like as if they're getting wise to the fact that we are getting wise to their ways, and we're starting to protect our assets, and they're trying to get their ducks in a line, so to speak, and make it so that we can no longer do that. And this is going to trickle down from the top all the way down to the bottom. I mean, you pointed out what was done to the Prime Minister of Iceland. It's almost comparable to the example that was made of Kennedy. I mean, we have to remember that President Kennedy did take on the banks, and they made an example of him by blowing his head off in broad daylight in front of everyone. that was a bold statement, and now the Icelandic prime minister jailing all those bankers. Well, that took some guts. You're taking on the powers that be, the puppet string pullers, essentially, when you do that. So I would have to agree. He seems to have been attacked because he's a direct threat, an enemy to the new world order. I think that's kind of what it stems down to, what you alluded to as well, Jeff, that this is all about moving closer towards one world government, one world cash system, one world currency, everything that the open foundation that Soros dreams about. And it's like as if they're going to try to pull a fast one on the people here through this so-called leak. So do you think this is all about destabilizing any political enemy of the Western elites?
I actually think that's the sort of the second goal. I think the main thing is to demonize any sort of offshore banking, offshore transactions. They also just decided as a second side benefit, let's just get rid of a lot of people we don't like. So I think that was secondary, because really number one to them at this moment in time is trying to consolidate power, try to get everyone into the banking system. They've been doing this for a while. They're even trying to get rid of cash in Europe. They've now gone to negative interest rates in Europe, because the whole system is so massively in debt that if interest rates were to rise, every government in the West would be bankrupt immediately. So now they're trying to get everyone into the banking system as quickly as they can so they can get interest rates below zero, and then there'll be no way for them to get out, and they're probably going to try to shut down any offshore jurisdiction for banking now after this. This will be the excuse they use, the same way they used 9/11, which was actually set up by people like George Soros and Dick Cheney to bring in the police state and bring in the Patriot Act. Of course, they name everything the opposite of what it is. It's seriously 1984 right now. It's only about 30 years late. That's really the intention. And so they're trying to bring in this, essentially lock down the entire system right now. They've been trying to do it for a while. But the only way that they can continue to do this is if people continue to obey authority, continue to pay their taxes. As long as you continue to do that, you will continue to be enslaved, and you'll actually end up enslaving us all, including myself, along with you, into what would end up being just essentially hell on earth. It would look a lot like Venezuela at that point. That's essentially what they want. A lot of the things they've done shows what they want. They want to move into extreme socialism, one world government with a one world currency, and that's exactly essentially what they have in Venezuela today is extreme socialism, and they have just one currency there. They only allow you to use one currency, and they're hyperinflating it, and it's turning into just Luke Rudowski and I were just there undercover, and it's turning into literally hell on earth.
Well, if they're going to crack down on these types of firms and try to stop people like yourself or myself from trying to hide our funds offshore, essentially, I mean, what I'm wondering is there ever going to be more? I think there is going to be more information coming out. I mean, I'm jumping around here a little bit, but I think we have been told that more information is going to be coming out. And we've heard similar things from whistleblowers like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. And do you find it interesting when we hear about how when these leaks come that just wait, guys, there's more to come. We haven't given you all of the juicy bits just yet. What do you think about when we're kind of teased with more info to come?
It does seem a little strange. I'm starting to question more and more Edward Snowden and even Julian Assange. They could just be essentially part of the system, just trying to make it look like, oh, look, there's some people kind of doing something, but they don't really do too much. Like Edward Snowden doesn't even mention the 9/11 was an inside job. That'd be like obvious to almost anybody, especially somebody who had all the files off of the NSA. So I really don't know who to trust anymore in those terms. It's really, that's how crazy it is. This system has become so nefarious and so insidious all around the world that you just really can't tell what's real and what's not hardly at all anymore. And so when they say there might be more information coming, we'll see. Let's see if they find the information on the $2.3 trillion that Donald Rumsfeld said was missing from the pentagram on September 10th of 2001 after the accounting department was hit by a plane that no one saw saw and there's no evidence of on September 11th on the morning. Let's see if they find that information. Let's see if they find the information on the Bush crime family, their drug running for the last 30 years through the CIA. Let's see if they find that information. So I don't think we're ever going to see that information put out by them. But here's the one interesting thing, and I'm not even sure if Putin is on board with the New World Order. Actually, I'm 50-50 on it. We'll find out now, because if he wants to, he could probably find some real dirt on the U.S. politicians. If he doesn't come out with that now, I think it's fairly safe to say that he's on board with the entire system, although they have to have enemies, so they make them look like enemies. But I would say if Putin doesn't come out with some information that really goes against U.S. politicians in the next few months, that it looks like he's just another puppet playing the game.
Yeah, you're right. And I would almost expect him to do that, because the Kremlin now are, in response to this, laughing it off about his 2 billion private holdings. They're saying, this is just nonsense. This is just political rhetoric. They're just making up stuff in the lead up to an election here to discredit him, is essentially what they're saying. And, you know, if they are going to crack down on these systems, is what I was getting back to before, cracking down on these firms, trying to stop us from being able to do this, what are some good ways then for people to be able to protect their assets? I wonder if, you know, Bitcoin is going to play into this, and is that a good way to get around some of these things? How can people who are interested in protecting their money offshore, but now are maybe a little risky because of what happened in Panama, or a little iffy, what are some better ways or other ways that we can get around taxation and around the government's greedy hands on our cash?
Well, the main thing to do is to awaken all your friends and neighbors to realizing that the government is a scam, it's an unnecessary evil, and to get everyone that you know to stop paying taxes across the board. We have to do this. We have to starve this beast. If we don't stop this now in the next few years, no one's going to want to live on this earth after that. It's going to be that bad. And people are just asleep at the wheel. They got to wake up and stop. And now if they don't, and if you're just someone like us and you just want to protect yourself, absolutely Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin was up today, but it should have really skyrocketed if people really understood what this meant. If they're really going to try to crack down on all offshore banking, which would be quite an endeavor, but they probably can do it because it's all U.S. dollar based. So as long as people use U.S. dollars, they can shut it down. Even today, Donald Trump came out and with his big plan on how to build a wall across a giant continent and get poor Mexican people to pay for it. And he said, what was it about? What was I just talking about? I lost my train of thought. Just before Trump, I was mentioning something. Or you weren't listening either?
Yeah, I'm not the best one to ask. I have an even shorter memory.
Anyways, Trump said something. So Trump said that he wants the poor Mexicans to build a wall, which he estimates to cost $20 to $40 billion across an entire continent. And I said and he said he was going to shut off remittances from using Western Union or things like that to Mexico to make them pay for it. I'm here in Mexico, by the way, and I do hope they put it up to keep people like him and all the other communists in the U.S. out of here. But if he does, that's what he's saying, right? And this is a guy who might be the president in less than a year from now. If Bitcoin didn't skyrocket on that, if it didn't skyrocket on these Panama papers, people just haven't figured out what's going on yet. So Bitcoin is absolutely, and that's why all governments and all central banks absolutely hate it. It is our last chance to have a free currency that they cannot control and they can't even stop unless they turn off the internet and turn off the power, which is actually an option for them. That's why they're talking about the internet kill switch. People need to wake up. This is serious. I know I always say with a smile on my face because they always want to shoot the messenger. So you gotta make it funny or they'll kill you. But this is dead serious stuff what's going on right now. People gotta wake up.
Yeah, absolutely. And these guys aren't playing around. And they in fact, plan things decades, sometimes even centuries before when they happen. And, that brings us into our next topic. I want to talk a little bit about your latest video because this plays into how this is going to play out over the next few years. And not only that, but more importantly, what people can do to help protect themselves against this. And this, of course, is your latest piece on the Shemitah Exposed. And we're going to play a little bit of a clip. We have just a brief clip from the intro of your newest video. So I want to give people a little taste of your newest Shemitah video, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about that and how it plays into, everything going on right now and what we can expect in the future. So here's a little bit of Jeff's latest Shemitah Exposed.
What you are about to watch may scare you. 2015 was terrible, and 2016 will be worse. Wars, market chaos, and political upheavals will mark this Jubilee year, culminating after October 1st. The world's current depression is deepening. Starvation, genocide, and market instability will drain wealth and leave revolution as a significant alternative. Never since the start of World War II has the world been threatened with so many kinds of disaster. Please do not be fearful. We've made this video to help you keep safe, even in this time of great and growing disasters. We helped thousands with our 2015 Shemitah video, and we will help thousands, even millions more with this Jubilee video. Please confront your fears. Take the time to watch this and understand what's taking place at the direction of a handful of soulless, psychopathic elites. Then use its information to become prepared and informed. Everything will change in 2016, but if you're prepared, you can survive and even thrive. On July 14, 2015, world-famous market analyst Jeff Berwick, aka the Dollar Vigilante, warned the world of an impending market collapse to begin by the fall. The mainstream media, aside from a few quotes, have had a blackout on his warnings, even as he became one of the most searched terms on Google. In his earth-shaking warning video, he said that he expected a crisis to come soon. His timing was based on the discovery of the Shemitah 7-year cycle. He gave a very short time frame for the beginning of the collapse. He said it would begin within 2 months, by September of 2015. Less than a month after he gave the prediction, markets around the world began to collapse. Worldwide, stock markets lost $11 trillion in wealth in the third quarter of 2015. He tried to warn of it, even going so far as purchasing advertising in Times Square with his book Shemitah Trends. How did he know the timing? He spent more than a decade delving into the inner workings of the financial elites who control the world monetary system and their occult beliefs.
Now I'm going to test you numerology skills by asking you to think about the magic 7.
Even going so far as to be, along with Luke Rudkowski of We Are Change and Dan Dix of Press for Truth, the first people to infiltrate the secret globalist elite meeting Bilderberg in Austria over the summer of 2015. As markets began to collapse in late August 2015, as he'd predicted, his speculative trades made fortunes, with one trade making 4,500% in just 3 days alone, and over 600% in 1 day. And on the very day in which he stated that the collapse of political, monetary, and financial systems would begin, the Eurozone put up borders for the first time, which he predicted would be the end of the Eurozone. Many assumed that while his predictions for the beginning of a collapse in the fall were correct, that it ended there, but he warned it was just the beginning. He stated numerous times that 2016 would be a bloodbath in the markets. His advice was to short the markets heavily in 2016, and January 2016 saw the worst opening month of trading in world stock market history. The trades that he and his team at the Dollar Vigilante recommended began piling up huge gains. Hundreds from around the world came to his Dollar Vigilante Summit in Acapulco at the anarcho-capitalist event Anarchapulco to hear more in February. In it, he told them that the end of the Shemitah was just the beginning of the crisis that would foment fully in 2016, the once every 49-year Jubilee year.
So just the beginning of crisis to kick off in 2016, the Jubilee year. So, Jeff, this is a fantastically produced series of videos. We're going to have links in the description so everybody can check out all the other Shemitah videos you've put out. But moving forward into 2016, what's your forecast? What sort of things can people expect in this Jubilee year, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is this the Jubilee year for the Shemitah?
Yes, so the Shemitah is every 7 years, and every 7 Shemitahs, so every 49 years, every seventh 7-year period is something called the Jubilee, and this all goes back to the Bible and through a lot of Jewish tradition and a lot of history. And so every 49 years is something called the Jubilee. So we're in that year now. It started last September. It ends next October, this October of 2016. And, when we were in Austria last year, Dan, going to Bilderberg, you'll probably remember I was talking a lot about the Shemitah, and I said, I think I've figured out some of their timing. And that's all I talked about. I think you probably remember that. And then a lot of the stuff started to happen, and it really emboldened me. And then I knew that the Jubilee was after the Shemitah, and I knew that the Jubilee could even be bigger than the Shemitah year. And I contacted people like Jonathan Cahn, who wrote the best-selling book, The Harbinger and the Mystery of the Shemitah, and that's where I found out about the Shemitah from. And he said, yes, the Jubilee is an extension. It gets even bigger in the Jubilee year. And then I was like, okay, this could be really big. And then I started to see a lot of the financial elites starting to drop hints about it, including William White of the Bank of International Settlements, which is like the central bank of central banks, said just a few months ago that this is a debt jubilee and that it could end up with complete devastation. And he warned of that. And he said this has been going on for thousands of years. So like you said, they've sort of been, they have this sort of knowledge. I don't know what it is exactly. I'm still trying to find out. I'm still searching. I'm sure lots of people out there have found other things as well, but they definitely have some sort of occult timing to what they do. And of course, we know they're into all kinds of occult things, all kinds of numerology, and I think this ties into it. So I think this year, before October of this year, is going to see some major, massive either market or political or financial or monetary shifts. And interestingly enough, the Jubilee year ends on October 1st, and October 2nd. And on October 1st, which is a Saturday, is when they're going to introduce the Chinese yuan into the SDR currency, a one world currency. So that might be the beginning of this switch to a one world currency. And I'm seeing all kinds of things of that happening already. So there's a lot going on.
Well, no doubt they play by these occultic numbers and their numerology, and just like in the video there, we saw, who was that lady? The head of the IMF? No,
Christine Lagarde.
Christine Lagarde talking about the magical number 7. So the reason why you are saying these things is that they're not, these aren't cheap predictions. You can track this throughout history, and when you track it back, you do see that things did indeed happen. And the last Jubilee year would have been,
1967, which, interestingly enough, the last 2 Jubilees, so the last one was 1967, that was the year that Israel won the Six-Day War. It's interesting, it was won in 6 days, and then they rested on the 7th. The last Jubilee before that was 1918. That was when the British Empire took back Jerusalem from the Arabs. So in the last 2 Jubilee years, there was a major event in the area called Israel. So I'm also expecting something big might happen there this year. And you see they've been whipping up this frenzy in the Middle East for a while now, way more than they have in the past. Have the Pentagon-backed ISIS guys fighting the CIA-backed Al-Qaeda in Syria, and ISIS and Al-Qaeda never attack Israel. So I'm not sure what's going on. Like this, I'm picking up the puzzle pieces as I go, but I wouldn't be shocked at all to see something very major happen in Israel by the end of September of this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And now couple that with the fact that, over the last 5-10 years, we have people getting interested in these things. We have things like Bitcoin coming up. We have more and more anarchists coming out, people realizing the problems with government. So I think leading up to this year, leading up to this clash, maybe the difference from, say, last Jubilee or last one was perhaps the resistance didn't exist to the point that it does today, but it seems that as we continue to, expose these plans and these agendas for what they are, the elite are fast tracking to try to crack down and make sure that they solidify this system. They put that capstone on the pyramid before it all comes crashing down. So it seems that things are fragile right now. I mean, the elite, they have their global system of power, but it's still like a house of cards where it's very fragile. The slightest thing could tip this over. So, I mean, are we going to come to a breaking point? It seems like we are. It seems like it's either going to be a crash of the dollar or some sort of huge economic meltdown, and they're just going to go all out for it and just announce the one world government, we're going to be your savior. Is 2016 going to be the year, and is it going to be economically driven? It seems like it is. It seems not necessarily that everything is going to come crashing down in 2016, but that the finances is going to be the key on flipping the switch on the New World Order. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. A huge part of it's going to be monetary and financial. And they've been trying to get this system to self-destruct essentially for decades. If you just look at every action of the U.S. government, of the Federal Reserve, of all the other governments, of all the central banks, it's all unsustainable. They're just trying to build up so much debt that the whole thing collapses. Now, whether there's a timeline to that or not is anyone's guess. We'll find out this year. But you have to remember also in The Economist magazine, which is a Rothschild-backed magazine, in the 1980s, they had a picture on the cover, and they always have very occult things on the cover that people are starting to figure out. But at that time, they had a phoenix rising out of the ashes of burning fiat currencies, including the dollar, and it said New World Currency 2018. So like I said, I'm just trying to pick up the pieces, trying to find all the pieces of the puzzle as fast as I can right now. But it looks like they might try to essentially collapse the world economy this year, which would totally make sense. I don't know how they can keep it going, really. It'd be almost a miracle if they kept it going with all the debt and all the problems in it. And then bring in a one world currency that they slowly bring in at the end of this year, and then probably bring in more, probably wars of some sort, to essentially get everything towards a one world currency by 2018. But you're right, there is resistance. We are the resistance. And the more that we can wake people up, the more that we can stop them from doing these things. And if everyone just went to Bitcoin right now, we would stop them in their tracks instantly. It'd be over. So we can win, but people have to wake up. And if they don't wake up, we're all going to wake up with chains on our legs in a couple of years. It's going to be that bad, in my opinion. Not every single person on the planet. You might be able to hide somewhere in the Rockies or somewhere in some tropical island somewhere that's uninhabited. But in general, most of us are essentially going to be complete slaves at that point. We're slaves now, but even way worse at that point.
Absolutely. These things often happen incrementally, but at this stage in the game, guys, they're kicking up their efforts and things are beginning to accelerate exponentially. So we're fast tracking our way towards this. They're fast tracking towards the New World Order, and we, the resistance, have to continue to expose it for what it is. So, Jeff, you've been doing a fantastic job at that. Where can people go if they want to learn more about the Shemitah? They want to learn more about you from the Dollar Vigilante. I mean, how can people protect themselves if they're interested in what they've heard from you today? Where do they go to learn more from you?
The easiest way is just go to thedollarvigilante.com and just put in your email right there on the front page, and I write about this stuff every day. In fact, I'm writing about the Panama Papers right now. As soon as I'm done this interview, I'll probably put up the article, essentially saying most of the same stuff we just talked about. And if they're interested in the whole Shemitah thing, which I think you should definitely check out, I've uncovered a lot of evidence that shows something's happening, and I think it could be this year. So just check that out. Dan's got the links to it down below at the Survive Shemitah website. Just check it out and see what you think. It's already starting to go viral. Our last one went multi-viral, and it actually was breaking. We were topping the Google search charts for a while there, including my own name. I'm apparently famous in the stock market area of India for some reason. But we're just trying to get this information out there. I just want people to know what's potentially going on. We're of course speculating a little bit on some things, but there's a lot of just actual factual evidence that this is actually being planned for this year, and you can just see it happening if your eyes are open. I do this stuff every day, as you do, Dan. I'm more financial, you're more media and journalism, but I do the financial stuff every day, and I just see every day I wake up, I'm like, oh yeah, I was expecting, yeah, here it comes. And it's like 5-10 things a day. Like you said, they're speeding up because they know people are waking up. This is a true race to the finish line, and you don't want to be a loser in this race. No, absolutely, man. And that's why I wanted to have you on today, because it's dire straits. We're coming down to the end of the game here. So once again, man, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today, and keep fighting the good fight, bro. You too. Take care. Take care.
you have all the major central banks, Japan, UK, Europe, America, all printing staggering amounts of money. The people who are getting that money, Jeff, are very happy, and their friends are very happy.
I believe in 2020 that we will be back into a rip-roaring, snorting bull market.
They may increase interest rates by 0.25% to kind of prove to the world how responsible they are.
Government is always mankind's biggest enemy throughout human history. It always has been. It's what destroyed Rome. It's what everything that's every empire has collapsed, and every war and all the billions of people have been killed. It's all due to government. So it is always our enemy.